All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Board of Trustees of East Central Independent School District being held on April 16, 2024, beginning at 5:30 p.m. in the boardroom. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Amelia Carrasco.
Here.
Junior Frisenhut. Yes. Victor Garza.
Here.
James Mulkey.
Here.
Dr. Bill is here. Monique Princess. Here. And John Messenger.
I'm here.
Four.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will move on to item 3, prayer and pledge. Mr. Scano.
Mr. McKay?
Yes, please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for the rain that you delivered earlier today, Lord. And Lord, we just ask you to continue to bless us with that. We just want to thank you for everybody that's in this room tonight. We're just grateful that you got them here safely. We ask that you guide them home safely and continue to provide your hedge of protection around all of our students and staff and the entire East Central community. It is in his name we pray. Amen. Amen. Stand for the pledges. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
the Texas flag.
I
Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. We'll move on to item 4, public comment.
No, sir.
No public comments? Great. Awesome. We'll move on to item 5, superintendent report. 5.1, facilities committee update. Mr. Scott.
Yes, sir, trustees. If it's okay, before I begin, I'd like to formally introduce Joette Barnes, our new chief instructional officer, to the group. You guys Joette is an East Central graduate. Her and her siblings, she's been in the district 16 years as a professional educator, exceptional teacher and reading coach at Salado. Was scooped up into administration pretty quick in her career, spent some time at Legacy Middle School where she was an academic dean and an assistant principal, and of course most recently we all know the fantastic work she's done as the principal at Oakcrest. And so very, very pleased with her work and her new role, and everybody in the district's really excited about the future of teaching and learning in EC. So Joette, welcome. All right, big day today. So as you are all aware, we have been engaged with the community for a few months now, really studying the condition of all of our facilities, looking at the demographic study with the community at our last meeting, the implications of that as it relates to enrollment, and also working together with LPA, our staff, and the community to evaluate the condition of our athletic facilities at our secondary campuses, the high school, both middle schools. We've been able to get to a point where we have a pretty good sense of the needs that have been identified. So we wanted to kind of bring all of those together for you tonight. We've also been working with LPA to kind of get some really rough cost projections of all of the things that were identified. So we're going to share all of those things tonight. And then Victor Quiroga, our financial advisor from Specialized Public Finance, is here with us tonight to kind of provide the board with a financial position so we can get a sense of our bonding capacity as well as the impact of any prospective bonds that might be necessary to kind of address all of the needs that the community is beginning to identify. So in your packet, you have a one-page document. It's just kind of a real high-level overview. Just wanted the board to know this is the work that the community's been doing so far to inform what we'll be sharing today. Shane is going to provide a little more formal overview of that, just to kind of level set everybody for the rest of the conversation today. And then you also have a packet that LPA prepared for us, which is going to kind of identify all of the facilities that are necessary, both campus and the other athletic facilities and such that were identified, and provide a nice overview of all the things that I've already mentioned there. And then you have a packet that Victor will review with the board regarding the financial position. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. McKay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Piscano. Thank you guys for the opportunity just to present the hard work that our community has been doing now for the last several months. So just going to give you an overview of what some of those meetings have been and what our ultimate goals and objectives have been thus far. So it started back in January 23rd. We reached out to the community and had approximately 117 individuals that showed up for our first facility study committee. We're calling that our steering committee. They're the ones that we bring a lot of this information back to help us make decisions. Mr. Thomas and his team came in and gave us a bond update. We did some high-level overview of previous demographer reports. Mr. Toscano really broke down some tax rate information. LPA presented on the athletic facilities review documentation that we had previously provided you guys. Mr. Urbanzik came in, gave an update where we are in technology, and at that point we broke up into different subcommittees to really dive into the work beyond that point. So that first night was really about giving them a basic understanding, where are we needing to go, what are our ideas and objectives, and then get their feedback moving forward. So we broke into a technology infrastructure committee. We had an athletics facilities committee, we had an extracurricular programs committee, we have a future high school planning committee, and then we've broken up into a Vader committee as well. So every one of those blocks is an actual meeting we've had since that January 23rd date. Those that you see in the green are actually the ones that we brought the entire committee back together that signed up for the athletic facilities review, which is close to about 55, 56 individuals from across the community. Any one of those that you see that are in blue, those are the ones we've had that are internal planning sessions, particularly meeting with our coaching staff, getting with them on their input, getting their feedback, and then meeting with LPA to go over potential future plans and what those options are, which you'll learn a little bit more tonight. One of the things that we've done throughout this process is we've toured every athletic facility with this committee. So from the 2 middle schools to every facility in the high school, we broke that up into 5 separate sessions. And then we brought the entire group back together to really do some prioritization. They got a chance to see it all. We received all their feedback. We essentially summarized all that feedback to say, okay, here are the big overarching things that the committee has said that we really should focus on and consider. Now let's go through an exercise to try to prioritize, and based on that prioritization, you'll see some of that information later. There's a few pictures. You can see the work. This committee has been probably out of all the committees really, really dedicated, and that's a lot of times to come together. And they've really given up their time. We've been very grateful for their commitment to that and where their commitment is moving forward. The second committee was the technology facilities. So again, you can see they've had 4 separate meetings. They had one that was in a planning session. You can see Mr. Urbanzik there helping to lead. And one of the very first sessions that they had was really about just getting them a chance to tour what is our current NOC right now, and then giving Mr. Urbanzik an opportunity to really explain about what the infrastructure is and what the challenges will be moving forward, particularly as we grow and add more campuses and facilities, and what the needs would be with that. And then those people came together and then created, again, another report that they're going to give to the larger subcommittee, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. Our extracurricular programs, so this would be for our FFA, band, JROTC, dance, cheer, JROTC. They came together as well. They toured all of those facilities. They sat and met with those instructors. They got feedback on where they are in their various programs moving forward. And then we also had a separate planning session with just their committee chair to really talk about what that presentation would look like when we got back to the larger subcommittee. So you can see 4 separate meetings with them. On February 29th, we brought the larger steering committee back together, and every subcommittee presented their findings and then ultimately what their prioritizations were on future projects that they would hope that we would consider looking into based on their feedback. And they were asked to provide rationale. What's your rationale for us doing that? And then at that same meeting, Mr. Toscano did a really great job of understanding what tax compression does and what state share does. You can really understand how building the runway for what a potential Vader may be able to do for us. And then the last thing was we then formulated 2 additional committees, and that was the Future High School Planning and the Vader Committee beyond there. So since then, our Future High School Planning Committee has come together twice. In the last session, we were very fortunate. We had a representative from Hutto ISD, Bernie ISD, and New Braunfels ISD, which, if you're not familiar, New Braunfels ISD is now opening up their they're opening up their second high school They've been around for almost 100 years, so that was a really big transition for them, and they really talked about what the journey has been like, what's the stages they did in order to get there. Bernie has been through it a while, but they talked about what some of their challenges and constraints were once they moved into their new facilities, one of those being honoring the past and making sure that you're continuing to build into the previous campus, not just giving the new campus all the new shiny toys. And then Hutto ISD really talked about just in the last 20 years the rapid, accelerant growth that they've had in their community, and they're now opening up their second high school as well. They went from a little 2A school to now having two 6A schools that are going to be around the corner, and it was really exciting. So the committee got to hear from those folks about their journey, ask questions, and then we were able to really go around some scenario planning. Now that we've had our new demographic information, which you'll get an opportunity to see it unpacked the way we presented it to them, their eyes were opened up pretty large about what the impact is going to be for our high school moving forward and what directions we need to go. In the previous meeting, we brought in Dr. Holman, who works very handily with San Antonio Works, really to understand what the local labor market looks like, what does the future labor market look like, and then really making considerations on what programs we currently have within EC that we already have built a pipeline, and we have facilities that are developing skills in students, and which ones do we currently not have that we need to potentially consider in the event we go to a second high school, and that would be an option that we can look at. And then we've had a couple of really good sessions. We've met with LPA. We've talked about the various models that they've had as an internal meeting. And then we also got a chance to meet with Dr. Jean Burton, who essentially has developed a roadmap for when districts are building their second high school and what are the implications and things to consider as you move in. So that was very enlightening as well. These are the facility committee meetings. So this is the overall larger steering committee. You can see on the April 23rd, the exact same presentation you guys are getting tonight. They'll get a version thereof of what you're getting a chance to see, and that'll be the larger steering committee, so they get a chance to see where all their work has gone, what we currently have to be able to show them, and then you can see the milestones that we have moving forward in consideration to bring to you guys for your consideration moving forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions about any facilities work that we've done up to this point. Been a lot of meetings, a lot of people committed, been really proud of their work, and their feedback has been exceptional. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. All right. Turn it over to LP.
All right, thank you. We'll turn it over now to LPA. Hello, Sarah Flowers.
Hello, I'm Sarah Flowers. I'm the studio director for our LPA San Antonio studio. Had the pleasure of working on your high school back in 2007. And then Carlos kicked me to the curb and said, "This is my client," and never gotten to work with y'all again. No, y'all are amazing, and I've enjoyed getting to see all the amazing work that y'all are doing and the incredible growth that y'all are undertaking currently. So really happy to come present to you a bit about some of those conversations that Shane was talking about. So just a reminder, this is a mantra that y'all have, right? Every minute, every student, every day. And it's just really critical that we keep remembering that all of these things that we're trying to do for your community is for those learners, right? It's to improve the amenities that they get, but to also attract and retain the wonderful talent that you'll want to be able to teach them. So just kind of a reminder, get our minds in the right place. I also wanted to give us a little bit of a pat on the back, guys. Y'all done some amazing work over your last 3 bonds. And so the 2007 bond for $48 million, as a reminder, that was able to touch a lot of aspects of the East Central High School. I think we all remember Portable Village. That's actually the project I got to work on, so maybe that's why I was removed. But then all of that great work that we did on the East Central High School campus, and then followed that up in 2016 with an $86 million bond, so almost doubled that bond program, but able to get great projects like Tradition, the new Performing Arts Center, renovations to some campuses, but then also all of your pre-KK facilities within that bond. So So 2022, we're in the midst of it right now, right? So we've had some great success, about to open North Elementary School, starting to work on South, done some great upgrades. You all know, I don't have to tell you all the things that you're doing, but some really great work, and $240 million is the bond that you were able to pass in 2022. And I know that was a hard fought. You learned a lot during that process, I would say. So a lot of lessons learned to bring us forward to where we're at today. So this demographic study that y'all did was pretty enlightening. I'm sure it was a little bit shocking to us all as well. So as we looked at the schedule of what the demographer was proposing, you know, we're checking off those first 3 needs in the bond that we're in currently, but then it's just pretty rapid what you need as far as the next round of projects. So looking at these practically and looking at schedules on when you would need to design, we're a little bit behind the gun even on your second high school. And so we've been charged and helping to think through what are some ways that we could get a high school sooner so that y'all can start. I mean, just the 3,500 kids or 3,200 kids at the high school currently, like that's not going away, it's going to get worse. So we have looked at some things that we learned from the conversations we had with New Braunfels and Hutto and Bernie about just some different ways that we can look at things. And I'll get to those in a moment, but I just want to put it in your minds now that opening a new high school in the 27-28 school year is probably not a likely scenario. So we need to be understanding what we're going to do in the meantime. So the committee, the facilities committee that came together, they had put together some potential new high school options, and these are what that committee had come up with: a 9th grade campus, a school of choice plus CTE, and a comprehensive high school. And so that was kind of our team's jumping off point on what to explore. Just some information, and I know this is very small, hopefully it's more legible in your packet, but we did just pulled some data together about Region 13, which is the Austin area, Region 20, which is the region we're sitting in. What do their high schools look like? And so if you look at them, your current enrollment is around 3,200 at the high school. And you can see that top line there, or this midline here. There aren't a lot of high schools in our area that are operating at that scale. The majority of them are below that and in the 2,200 to 2,800 student range. So we thought that was really some interesting information to digest and understand kind of what our neighbors are doing and what that sweet spot is for a high school. So then we took that information and we started parsing it out. Like, well, so what does a second high school and quite frankly a third high school look like for East Central ISD? And so we came up with 4 scenarios that we presented at that last facilities meeting with the team, with the high school facilities group. And I think the ones that they were naturally gravitating towards as well as us are, you know, smaller high schools. The second and third high schools would be smaller high schools. A lot of what we heard from the other communities is that second high school, and it's all the things that I know y'all have talked about. You don't want to necessarily be competing against each other in UIL events at the beginning of that kind of relationship. So maybe it's a 4A school, that second high school. So keep that smaller in the 2,200 student range. Allow your legacy high school of East Central to still be kind of that powerhouse as it were. So we did look at several different scenarios where we played with, do you have a CTE, you know, heavy campus? Do you have 3 schools in scenario C? We looked at, do you start ramping down the number of students that go to East Central High School and have 3 equal size high schools over the, you know, the next 10 to 15 years? Or do you build 2 mega high schools and have, you know, 2 3,600 campuses? The kind of direction we gained from the facilities team as well as Mr. McKay is we really liked we liked, kind of scenario A, where it was 2 smaller high schools, but also really liked the way that New Braunfels is approaching it. So maybe not as long as a time frame as they did it, but they built a middle school, and it became their 9th and 10th grade center. And they kept it that way for 10 years, and they would bus the kids from Long Creek Middle School to the main high school so that they could get all of their extracurriculars. I think that was probably a little bit of a strain on the district to do that amount of busing every day. But they did start with a middle school size school, and now they're creating a comprehensive high school. So that is one of the scenarios that we started putting numbers to understand, can you build phase 1 of a high school similar in size and scale to Valor Middle School with a few more amenities, more tennis courts, more the baseball, softball fields, those sorts of things. And then in phase 2, you start rounding it out so that you can take on, the next grade. So the way you might do it is you build a 9th grade or 9th and 10th, and then those become the 11th and 12th graders too once you build up the entire high school. So that is what we're calling this phased approach. So I'm sure that's way too small for y'all to read. But so a 2,200 student high school in a phased approach, phase 1, you need to build, enough classrooms and lab spaces for that initial 1,200 kids. But then you also have to build out what's called the core spaces. So your administration needs to be sized for the ultimate build out. So does your library, your cafeteria, all of those places that every student uses need to be built out for that full comprehensive high school size. And then in phase 2, you can bring on more of those extracurricular spaces as well as the rounding out of the classroom spaces that you need. So that is what's shown on the left with phase 1 and phase 2. And the other option is that you just say, we're just going to build the comprehensive high school, one go, we're going to build it all out, and we're going to have 9 through 12 start there immediately. And so all that is, it's all the things that are divided into those 2 columns consolidated into one single phase. So that's a longer construction time. So those generally take about 36 months to build. So you're a little longer before you can get into them. Whereas the phase 1 of the phased approach, you could potentially be in it in 2 years. Some other things, so we did this kind of programming in a vacuum. We need to have a meeting with everyone to understand what does the second high school look like to you all. Are we going to leverage the Performing Arts Center that's at your main high school campus, and that becomes a district-wide, amenity, and you don't build out a robust theater arts auditorium at your second high school? Is this the ag campus? Is the main high school where you go if you're interested in pursuing ag programs and you don't have those available at other campuses? So there's still some work to be done here on what does the perfect second high school look like for East Central. Okay, a reminder, so we're about, it's like the build up to show y'all the numbers that we've started pulling together. So I'm like getting my nerves out. So total project costs. I just wanted to give y'all a quick reminder of how we come up with those. So total project costs are the amount that, so on bid day, we get a number from the general contractor, and that's construction amount. We add on soft costs, which include the permitting fees, design fees, surveys, geotechnical, all of those sorts of things. The furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, so all the things you need to furnish the spaces. Any technology that's going into those classrooms and administrative spaces. And then some contingency that we like to put onto every project for those unforeseens or betterments that we want to do along the way. An example of escalation, just really quickly. So if we were to take Valor Middle School, which just bid a month ago?
Correct, a little less, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. So that's a 1,200 student middle school, 157,000 square feet. Total project cost. So once you've paid everyone you've got to pay to open that school, $96 million. If we were to escalate that out to 2028, that exact same project with all the exact same amenities would cost roughly $113 million because of escalation. And what we have heard from our contracting partners is it's about 4.5% per year is what they're seeing as far as escalation. That was a lot worse during pandemic and the end of pandemic. We were seeing 30% some of those years. So it has leveled out, but still projecting 4.5. My hope is that it levels out even more. I don't know if it'll ever go down, but at least I'd like to see a taper and level off. But we have to plan for, I don't want to say the worst case scenario, but we can't plan for the best case scenario. So same school again, if you don't bid it until 2036, it costs you $157 million. So you can see that time isn't our friend. We need to be designing and building as quickly as we can so that you don't end up spending more and more. Okay, here we go. So if we were to look at the next 4 elementary schools that you need per the demographer's report and the schedule with which they recommend that you open them, a middle school that's following the prototype of tradition and now north and south, all in, including furniture, fixtures, and equipment, is going to cost you $54 million for elementary school 10, 57.8, 62.4, 67.5. Only thing that's changed is time in all of those scenarios. If we look at the middle school, bidding in 2030, 2031, roughly $111 million. Now, ag facility, that's something that I haven't mentioned yet, but I know that's something that's very near and dear to this community's heart, is agriculture. If we wanted to look at building a new roughly 14,000 square foot barn and improving the pens that you have in your existing facilities, we based this off of a project we did in Pleasanton about 6 years ago, and that is going to run you roughly $4.4 million in today's dollars. So that's something that I'd love to hear from the group on if you think that's something that we'd want to anticipate that the community would be interested in, and how can we best tell that story. And then the high school, number 2, if we were to do that kind of phase plan and just do phase 1 in this next initial bond, if you decide to pursue it, phase 1 would be roughly $212 million. So you can see we had a $220 million bond in 2020. It would only pay for high school phase 2 in this scenario. Was it 240? 240, sorry. You could get an ag barn too. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk about the athletic master plans, and then we're going to circle back to all the dollars one more time.
Let me ask you a question first, ma'am.
Absolutely.
About the high school.
Yes, sir.
When is it projected? What year?
2027, 2028 is when it's being projected that you need it in the demographer's report.
2027, 2028.
Yes, sir.
The entire time frame was multi. If you did a full-blown high school at, let's say, 2,200, you're looking at about 3 years to build, and probably about 16 to 18 months to design. So let's say 4.5 years total. So wherever you started in relation to that, getting to a open of, let's say, March, April, you'd have to circle back 4.5 years for that start to be able to open that school. On the elementary school side, it takes about 2 years to build, and I would say roughly about between 8, 10 to 12 months to design. So all in 3 years, there would be a time frame for elementary school. So you would work back from opening, let's say 2018, you would have to have that design started in the summer or early 2015, if that makes sense.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
My trustee says in my packet, I'll be too late.
No, you're good.
But
Well, this is an important point.
Yes.
This is an important thing for the board to kind of wrap their minds around. The demographers say we need to open a high school in 27, 28. If we're going to build a whole comprehensive high school, it's impossible to get moved in at that point. So one of the options is the phased option, which does give us the ability to at least open that school for freshmen and sophomores in the 27, 28 year. Given a possibility as well of this board considering what you guys did consider with Valor, where you guys hired LPA before the bond was passed 6 months ahead to start the design process. Was that for North?
Yes.
Okay. For
Did
North, that was it.
we use traditions
Yes, ma'am.
to get a
North?
jump start on
Yes,
it?
ma'am. Now, go ahead, sir.
So that, anyway, just keep that strategy in mind that if we wanted to try and get ahead, if it presents an opportunity, the board may come back and think about that at some point to say, for the design of that high school, whether we phase it or go all the way, getting a head start on design, and if the bond doesn't pass, you shelve it because you know we're going to need it anyway at some point, might be something to consider, which you guys did in the last bond, which gave us the opportunity to recover from the initial failed bond. It put us really behind, right?
let me,
Yes, sir.
I know it's probably here, but the elementary school at Elmendorf, what is it projected?
To open?
Yes.
For this,
Oh,
north or south?
Hickory?
South.
Hickory Ridge.
Hickory Ridge?
2000, the summer of 2026.
All right. Thanks a lot. I'll move to it, but I understand. They give me some notes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, sir.
Elmendorf.
Yes, sir.
What do you call it?
Well, it's in the Hickory Ridge subdivision. We don't have a name for it yet. Yeah. So north is now Honor. We know that.
Yes.
But south, we have not yet named.
Okay, because I've been asking you some questions and I didn't know. It's Hickory.
Well, the subdivision is Hickory Ridge.
Gotcha.
There it's in.
All right. 2026, am I right?
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely, I'll be back.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to take a slight detour. Last time we had spoke together, we had talked about the existing facilities for the athletic complex. Today, as Mr. McKay noted, we've gone through a number of meetings, both with the community at large, looking specifically at our athletic projects, as well as with district personnel, coaches, the athletic department, Stevie, John, the full team through there, really gathering all the ideas. And what we're going to walk through today is 3 options for master plans. Now, one thing to note is what we're looking at is master plan of athletic facilities at the existing high school campus. We have talked about and considered, very similar to the existing facilities report, athletic facilities across the street at Cass, over at Legacy as well as Heritage, to understand the needs of all the athletic facilities throughout the district. Those are sort of well-known, well-documented, and not looking for additional facilities at that location, just bringing the existing facilities up to the same level as the new middle school, Valor, and creating cohesion and equity across the district for those. So we won't look at those today, but just remember as we look long-term, we are still considering those items as well. And those will be incorporated into our district-wide master plan once we narrow down to a single option here on the main campus. There'll be additional, when we open a new high school campus as well, there'll be athletic facilities there that we will plan around as well. But for this effort, it's really focusing on the existing high school campus where the vast majority of the athletic needs are based on the current conditions. So we are going to look at 3 options today. They all achieve different objectives throughout them. However, in terms of the facilities that would be developed ultimately would all be very similar and comparable. So when we identify work at the softball field and all of that work being done, whether it's in place like this option is, or whether it is a relocated softball field, the quality and size of the facility is the same across all of these. And that's the same for our competition gymnasium, for the seating counts in all of our stadiums, and working through those. All right. And these are total project costs we see here down in the bottom. Again, this is a master plan. Thinking of this as a 20 to 30 year plan, not all of this work would necessarily show up in the initial bond. There would be a prioritization process once we accept a long-term master plan as we work through there. So the first option, A, we have here, is largely derived around rebuild in place. So these facilities are many of your same facilities that you currently have, built in place, but fully rebuilt and refurbished to create quality athletic facilities that meet current standards and address many of those deficiencies we identified in the report. So starting on the north is to the arrow, as we see it on the right here. But looking towards the upper part of the screen, starting with softball, would be renovated in place with artificial turf surface, as well as fixing the drainage improvements through there. And as we move down, all of our outdoor sports remain in the same location. Practice facility would go on to the practice facility, existing soccer practice field. Baseball will remain in place. There'd be a renovation to the existing stadium, which would incorporate the bleachers and everything outside the track edge. We also have a gymnasium 2, which we identified within most individual issues, including age of facility and condition of facility. We're proposing the new competition gymnasium at that location. So that competition gymnasium would provide 2 courts for practicing and 1 with a competition court with additional seating capacity to raise it up to a full capacity gymnasium. The existing competition gym would remain in place and be utilized as not only on a daily basis for our educational PE classes, but also for JV competition and events through there as well. Lastly, we have on the opposite of Gymnasium 2, we have a natatorium placed there. Looking at the long-term development of bringing a natatorium for swimming and diving practice to the district for there as well, so those students aren't being bussed off campus. Looking at our second scheme, the second scheme does a lot of the same things as option 1, but option A, excuse me. Option B does the additional aspect of consolidating our outdoor sports together and consolidating our indoor sports together. So right now, as identified in the existing conditions report, we have locker rooms for students at all ends of campuses, very far from their competition and practice facilities. What this option would do is consolidate our outdoor athletics with a new team room building that would serve the stadium for track, soccer, and football, as well as baseball and softball, all central to one building. As you may notice, baseball stays in its same location. However, softball moves from its existing location to the south into the parking lot location, which solves a number of issues over there, solves some of our grading issues, brings it much closer to parking as well as fan amenities to have access to that portion. So that, in that manner, we ended up with a single consolidated outdoor athletic area. Indoor athletics would consolidate around the new gymnasium and it's on that same Gymnasium 2 footprint. And just like that first scheme, it would be a competition gymnasium with practice facilities, as well as weight room, training facilities, and AD offices. We also are utilizing that same location for the natatorium in this option, and the existing existing football locker rooms that are to the south end of the stadium. Those would be remodeled into storage, athletic storage, as well as weight room facilities for that. So we wouldn't be getting rid of those existing structures, just remodeling them and repurposing them so we can upgrade the locker room and restroom facilities and coaches' office facilities to resolve many of the issues that are existing through there.
Quick question, y'all, A to B, are y'all rotating the baseball field a little bit counterclockwise from A to B?
It is looking there as well. We would dig into that. Part of that, as we rebuild baseball and turf it, we have the opportunity to make some slight corrections on that may give us some opportunities to increase the room around the stadium.
Okay.
If you guys have been in that
So
back.
that's in the plan, it's not a typo or anything?
Correct. In either option, as we look through there and identify those areas and work through that design as we progress further, we can look at either preserving the exact footprint or rotating it slightly to gain a little more room and optimization at the stadium there as well. Yep.
I have a question on the parking.
Sir.
I can't see that, it's kind of small print there, but I'm assuming the dark areas are parking.
That is correct. Yep.
So we're losing some parking on Plan B, or I shouldn't say losing, but just
Correct.
moving it around.
We're shifting around a little bit where that parking count spaces, it would remain the same. We would shift some of them to there's an existing portable there and optimize parking through there, as well as work with the design of the ongoing police department and warehouse there to accommodate as much parking as we can as those buses leave to the transportation center long term. So there's still some design to be worked out around those parking lots as well, but that is, we would strive to maintain parking as is.
Yeah, so my concern on there is the parking distance for the baseball field, right? Looking at the baseball field, I'm thinking some people that have more challenges of walking that, or so similar to the
Yep.
softball field, right? So you just swap it over, making it further to the baseball field instead
Yeah.
of further to the softball field.
So we would anticipate this parking lot that's a little bit closer to baseball and softball through there to be the
That
main.
orange piece, that orange little elbow there, Eric,
Correct.
is like the main
Yep.
entrance to the facilities?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is the main entrance of the facility, sort of a home team plaza there for all of those teams
So
to
that
work
little
around.
parking lot could
Yeah.
potentially, end up being,
Yeah,
potentially.
for these parking lot, this larger parking lot that's near the existing transportation center, more than likely that would only be utilized during a football game when you have those max capacity crowds. We would be able to hold probably your entire crowd, maybe not for a softball playoff game, but for the majority of your softball and baseball events would utilize that smaller parking lot through there.
Yeah, in that,
I got you.
yeah, and then in the center, between the two fields, you've got a consolidated locker rooms,
Yeah.
restrooms, all those things. Or locker rooms, what else
Yeah,
is in there?
locker room, weight room, training room, as well as some fan amenities, coaches' offices, all of the concessions for both baseball, softball, as well as the stadium through there.
So the first option was 109 million total project cost in today's dollars.
Yep.
118 for the option B, so to do that is got a little bit of a premium, but solving all the same problems, right?
Correct, yeah, and there's a few other minor differences that are affecting the price as we work through there in terms of impacts of parking through there and development of those existing spaces. But overall, yes, very similar, or excuse me, a little bit more expensive to have the consolidated building here, as well as bringing softball to the south and sort of impacting more of the site at that point. It does provide some opportunity as we're giving up, no longer utilizing the existing softball field, that as we talk about an ag facility, if there needs to be some expansion, there'd be more opportunity for expansion of that ag facility or another program up in that area as we think long-term overall campus master plan outside of athletics.
Yeah, part of this too is just making sure we have sight of finding the most optimal time for not disrupting the school in relation to construction, and also trying to make sure that we minimize unknown utilities as well too, is also a factor in relation to placing these fields or renovations in the right place. So right now, not only addressing the softball field and the parking concern on the back end, but also making sure that we're trying to lessen the disruption of the school itself, which at the end of the day is going to be a full-blown school at this point until you go to high school. So those aspects go into it as well too, to just making sure that we look at finding the right place for this work.
So one thing to note about both options A and options B that we've looked at so far, the tennis facility would remain in its existing location across the street on Cass campus. So the same footprint of those 8 tennis courts, just being rebuilt due to the condition of the courts through there as well. So we do see those incorporated into the cost, where they replace the existing tennis courts, as well as renovations to that existing building to meet the needs for fan amenities and storage through there as well. So we are incorporating those, even though they're not showing up optically in this image, they will in our final master plan. That changes.
Just to restate concept, option A is just kind of fixing everything where it's at.
Correct.
Option B is using a strategy to try to consolidate outdoor sports and then consolidate indoor sports.
Correct.
Make them proximal geographically on the high school site. So then when you go to C,
Correct.
we're
Yeah.
consolidating the entire athletic program.
Unified athletics as we move
Unified athletics.
as we move to our last one. So as we build on those, we are addressing from option A to option B some additional concerns. With the location of softball where it's at, we still run into the same parking and access that you mentioned, long walk from parking. Those are still a concern with the current design. Now, there are some opportunities to potentially build in an access road and provide parking that would be additionally closer, but that also impacts costs that is not currently, that additional parking near softball is not currently in the scope of the project. So that would incur additional costs if we were looking to address some of those items. But just as we consider those as we all move through. So as Mr. Toscano just mentioned, option C, unified athletics. So this option is our biggest change from what the current environment is. It moves all of our athletics and competition facilities accessed off the south. So as you can see, we've enlarged the parking lot significantly to handle the full capacity for basketball, softball, the stadium, volleyball games, all of those occurring, as well as tennis. So we're moving tennis here across the street. This main, mostly yellow block, that becomes our competition gymnasium, as well as every one of our athletic locker rooms, training facilities, weight rooms, coach's office, everything under one big roof. So it is a single athletics building. Everybody knows where to go. And it really changes the front door to where campus is. Currently, you know, your front door is really off this side. It'll change off the east side, excuse me. It'll change it for the athletics entering in on the south end of campus. So all your visiting team, all your home fans will know to now come to this side. What that does is gives us a single location to really revolve our competition venues on all sides around the proposed building. So the stadium to the south, tennis and softball to the north there, excuse me, to the west, and then to the north, baseball there, with some fan circulation sort of expanded around the building, as you see there in the pinkish red through there as well. Natatorium would also utilize the space, sort of centered up where the existing weight room is on the south end of the stadium, and having access to that parking lot.
But on this plan here, what happens to the construction teaching area, the woodwork?
It's-
I think that's already
Construction trades.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking over there on the south campus?
Yeah, where the auditorium will be.
Right.
Is that where
That's not
the-
replacing that.
No, because that's going to be the new CTE facility that's going next door to the CAS.
So move that over.
That'd be the building,
Yeah.
and then you build new construction instead.
Yeah, it would be replaced through that. In general, I think as we had worked with the community and with the district on these long-term plans, really thinking this as a 30-year plan, the natatorium was relatively low on the overall priority list compared to addressing the existing issues. So that many of those facilities where we're putting the natatorium would be replaced or relocated with some of the other projects that are ongoing or planned through there as well. So we tried to be as responsible as we could and not, leave old buildings unutilized if they still had life into them. So as you saw in previous options, we're repurposing some of those locker rooms and trying to be as responsible with the existing infrastructure as possible for there as well, while still providing the overall vision to the campus in the long term.
When you mentioned the stadium improvements, does that include the press box?
Yes, the stadium improvements would include new bleachers, new press box, as well as some form of restroom and concessions work, whether those are fully new buildings incorporated into that press box structure or utilization or remodel of the existing restroom and concessions facilities that, especially the ones on the home side aren't that old. They still have some definitive life into them. So they would be utilizing some of those spaces as well.
And in today's world, does a press box need an elevator?
Any press box over 500 square feet needs an elevator. There's sort of no way around that.
How big is our current press box now? Current?
No, sir, it's under, it's like 45.
So just for reference sake,
Right.
our current press box is just a hair under 500.
Correct.
So if that were to be replaced with something the same size, it would not require an upgrade.
Right.
Not that we're there yet, I just know it's.
There's a minor caveat to that in the code. Any athletic facility that has press box facilities that overlook it, they're grouped together. So in your case, you have a 460 on one side, and you probably have about a 360 on the other. If you add those together, you're over that 500 square foot. Visitor side.
So you combine both.
If they're overlooking the same athletic facility, you have to consider them together. So they sort of close the loop. They close the loophole of having 3 press boxes lined up on one side and just calling them separate. But it is a direct item in the code. So right now you guys are grandfathered in. You don't have that. But looking at any new facility would have to accommodate that code for that as well.
Are we grandfathered in right now?
We are,
But
I
it's-
thought if we had to, we could replace that press box with one the same size and not need an elevator, but Eric just said what he said that I'd never heard before.
But the
Yeah.
I do know COMAL is doing exactly that right now, and they're not gonna put an elevator in, so that must mean they don't have a press box on the visitor side.
But the work that's being done right now, currently?
So, to that, I was going to add some information updates. So we did, the roof hail damage that we've been fixing all across the district did also affect the press box, so we were getting that roof replaced. And in recent weeks, we discovered that there's some structural damage. So they started to repair that. Problem is, you gotta tie that structure to the wall. And there was some damage to that. So then they were to fix the wall, but you have to tie that structure to the floor, which there's damage to that. So currently, architect is, it's on that particular project, advised that we do not use it. We started to look at some solutions for temporarily maybe replacing that with something usable, $500,000, just to do that for something we may not, if we pass it on and fix it correctly, it would be a waste of money. So for all practical purposes, it's looking like it might end up being condemned. Just so you know.
And so the roof money is not sunk into it, we didn't.
Well, you want to speak to that?
So it was a hail damage replace
Right.
roof. That's what
Insurance.
started, correct. And unfortunately, yeah, there wasn't enough structure to tie it to.
Right.
So we got
So
into that
will we be able to
structure.
put that money towards something?
The hail
Or does it
damage
have to-
money?
Right.
No, it's already
Just
sunk
sunk.
into this
For the roof.
repair where we were repairing
So
the
the
roof,
insurance
and then we
is-
got into structure.
And the fact that it's deteriorated over time doesn't count, we don't get insurance.
Correct. Yeah, they came in to replace the roof, right?
And all
Not
the other
the
things were
structural
old, and were
damage.
covered, it wasn't because of anything.
No, it's old structural
Like
damage.
everything else we've seen.
Correct, yes. It's
So to add, to add insult to injury, just to add insult to injury, we know Gym 2, we've seen in every one of these plans, Gym 2, in this particular case, the unified athletics goes away altogether. But in option A and B, it gets demoed and replaced. Because there are issues with A, the floors warping, it's been a long time challenge there. There's no bleachers for really to have competition in the school. Our size and even smaller, this Conference High School needs 2 competition gyms. And given that we've had a weight room up there forever, the structure is compromised because it was never designed or engineered for a weight room. And the roof is failing, and that's a $500,000 fix. So if we fix the roof, you still don't have a competition gym and you have structural issues with the entire building. So we've got basically a press box that needs replacement. We've got to figure out whether we want to operate without it until the community says yay or nay on the bond, because otherwise we're sinking money into something we won't get back. And then as far as Gym 2, do we want to put $500,000 into a roof or wait, right? So we're starting to see these age facilities actually deteriorate to a point that we can't even Band-Aid them.
And if we don't pay for the bonds, just say the press box, where are the funds gonna come from?
General fund balance, we don't really have dollars for it, given that we got no new money from the legislature, which is pretty strapped. I mean, it would have to be fund balance.
And we purchased the land before the bond passed, the land on 87 and Beck. So for that, we gathered funds from there to, did we purchase that land before the bond went through, that piece?
Oh, yeah, we were able to reimburse ourselves for that
So
property.
we passed the bond for transportation, can that money be allocated to that?
So we did ask that, that's a really thoughtful question. So we did talk to our bond attorney because we were thinking, well, let's say the bond doesn't pass. And let's say on the back end of this project program, we have some savings. Could we use them for a press box? And the answer to that is no, because the board can choose to use them for any other things consistent with what was in the original bond anywhere in the district, but athletic facilities were not in the bond. So we could not use it for the press box. So that took that option off the table. Because we were kind of thinking if we have to do it, on the back end, could we reimburse ourselves because it's an athletic facility, as you can correct me if I'm off. So we've got a little dilemma brewing there. So in the meantime, what I've directed staff to do is start to look at if we had to have next season with only the visitors press box, could we operate the scoreboard, the PA system, the clock, all the things without the home press box for 1 year. So we're making that happen, figuring out what that would take for now, given what we learned about the expense to try and produce something for the home side that may or may not end up being something that's really throwing money away we don't have, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
Okay. So that's where we're at. So Sarah,
Let me ask you, you said the data term was long, the list that, is that from the subcommittee?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes, sir. That was one of the lower on their, on the prioritization exercise we did with all of them. There's a large group of them. That was towards the very bottom. They felt, i.e., one of the ones that really stood out the most in is accessible facilities, particularly dressing rooms and locker rooms that got them closer to their playing services. Particularly we're talking like, softball, girls soccer. They have long distances to walk. So accessibility was one of those areas that was like lifted up really, really high. Drainage, there were some other areas like that,
so
and
what
then
we
stadium
basically
press
did,
box.
we knew we were gonna get to a place where dollars,
Yep.
real costs were gonna, right? So when they found all these things, we consolidated them, and Shane let them do an exercise, say, what's the most important things? So at least the board could get a sense of what the community thought were the most important of the important.
Yes.
So you'll see that here in a minute.
I just want to know that just
Yes, sir.
because, you know, I
Yeah.
want them to feel.
Yeah, natatorium ended up.
Early, it was funny, early on, there was feedback, like we really need to consider an auditorium for our swimmers and things, but then when it came down to prioritize,
Okay.
the committee was like,
Gotcha.
that's not as pressing as some of the other things after they toured all the
Why am I
facilities.
thinking there was something as far as land was involved and a will or a deed or something, and an auditorium was top on their list, on the highest on their list as far as the people that own this property. Am I just like imagining that?
Not totally, there's two pieces of information consistent with what you're suggesting. So one is the Valor development on near Pecan Valley, the old Pecan Valley Golf Course. That was a trust, there was a deed restriction in there, a covenant restriction, the family, the Burks, which Pecan Valley was E.J. Burke's school, had a covenant restriction that said basically the developers, if they ever developed it, had to have something for the kids in East Central ISD. So as they tried to reinvigorate that development, they come to us on a couple of occasions and said, what could we build that would benefit the kids? And the natatorium was top of our list as something that might benefit all kids, summer programs, all the things. So that conversation we've definitely had a couple of times lately as they resurfaced. The other has to do with the church near South Campus that is kind of in transition, right? They're trying to survive over there. And we do know that there was, and we have not run this by legal or anything, we just know that there was an old deed restriction there, that basically the family that gave the church that land indicated that their desire, if that church ever went away, for that property to go to benefit the kids of East Central ISD. That's correct. And that would be another thing we thought, well, that could potentially someday be a site for maybe a net like that. So those are your
So the other family, the Burks, they didn't specify a natatorium, or?
They didn't specify,
Or
they
just
just,
what part of it?
yeah, they came to us a couple of, like, the developer said, hey, we'll build y'all a BMX track. And we're like, well, no, we kind of think we need, there's some other things we need, like a natatorium, maybe
Right.
benefit the kids. But yeah, we just had some, that the development's never gotten off the ground, at least not yet. Okay.
Before we jump into the numbers again, because I know that we're going to go down a rabbit hole with there as we prioritize through there. But I'd like to get, are there any other comments or preferences from the three options that we've shown from the board to get your input from them, or additional things we need to consider as we work through this with the community further? The ultimate goal is to develop one singular master plan and one direction for the next 20 to 30 years on the athletic side. And then from that, identify the pieces that need to move forward now, based on budget, based on, all priorities, all of those other factors. But ultimately, in the next coming months, looking at Mr. McKay's schedule that he had up there, prior to the end of our facility meetings in August, we need to develop a singular master plan that the district will adopt and move forward with long term. So would love to hear any feedback, comments, preferences on that.
Let me ask you, okay, on the subcommittee, what are the three plans that they're looking for?
We had not showed them the plans yet. We wanted to present them to you guys first before we showed them the plans. They'll get first look at
It's hard
this.
for me to wrap my head around it because we don't know if we're going to do, like we discussed, 9th and 10th at a new spot, and then 11th and 12th. I mean, so just a freshman softball player at a 9th and 10th grade campus, we have to do less over here, but which one would be better for us as far as, because we're going to have to build them something eventually over there? Or
In
no?
phase one, we are showing the softball and baseball field, so a football field, not like a stadium. Softball, baseball, tennis, and a practice
So
field.
just
Playing gyms.
Right.
So you could still practice football there, but you might have your game.
And you could actually play some varsity games
Yeah.
there. It just wouldn't be appropriate at the second phase one high
Because
school.
that way it's not, we don't have two 5A or 6A,
Right.
Correct.
9 through 12
You
high
have,
schools.
you would then have JV on your 9th grade 10th grade campus and varsity on the main campus through here, or
And so which
some
one-
recollection to
because
that.
I've seen this all the time, which one would make sense to do that? As far as phase one, doing the 9th and 10th? Because I'm liking the 3, or
Yeah.
C, or whatever this one is. C.
So just, so as far as the stadium goes, I think any of, y'all jump in. It can be appropriate for varsity stadium for either situation. I think what we're looking for here is, if we start phasing in some of these athletic improvements, do we want to move towards option C? So that if we say C is the direction we want to go, instead of tearing down gym 2 and building a second playing gym, we're going to build that west of the stadium. Because we know in the long range, we want to build all that vision out right there.
Right.
Whereas in the other plans, we would be saying, no, if it's A or B, we're going to tear it, when we get to the gym 2, we're going to tear it down, rebuild it like it's happening.
Yeah.
So we just, and I don't have that, I don't know what the committee's going to say, but really y'all's preference at least would be really important for us to kind of indicate.
Yeah. One,
Personally, I like C. It consolidates everything, gets all the outdoor sports in one area, all the indoor sports in one area, and it just makes more sense.
Well, that happened to be the architect's preference as well. We just wanted to provide some options.
That's all the problem.
I like it too, and I also, but I wanted to ask real quick, did I miss where, because I love option C, but what happens with the locker room conversion to weight room and locker room conversion, is that to storage, is that over here?
that would be where the natatorium is currently located.
The orange
So,
and the yellow is?
And then-
So where would it go? It would go into that.
so that weight room would be located, yeah, the orange, we'd have a weight room on either end of this building, and the storage would be incorporated within the building.
So
So
we still get that?
all of the square footage and program, those areas are within each of these schemes evenly. It's just whether they're all under one roof, under 2 roofs, or possibly under 3 roofs, I believe, in the first scheme.
So the only thing I reacted to with Plan C was back prior to the 2016 bond, the community made it really clear that we want you guys to make sure that you don't get rid of assets if they have usefulness. And they were very adamant, because the original recommendation was to demolish ECDC. The community committee said, well, are there any pieces that could be used? So we do office child nutrition out there. We use the cafeteria for training. We use the old gym back there as a training facility. We actually do use them all, but in the original recommendation, demolish them. We also ended up renovating all of the elementary schools where initially there were a couple recommended for tear down rebuild. So in this case, you've got some facilities, but we just got to know this going in. Gym 2 is going to be demolished, right, in all 3 plans, but it's gone. Where football currently is, until the natatorium goes there, we have to figure out what to do with it. Do we demolish it? Do we reuse it? Because you're going to have all these facilities there that are empty now. That we have to just convince the community, because we did do some renovations there in 2015.
So what is the plan for that if we don't, because it's low on the
Yeah.
totem pole for the natatorium, if we don't do the natatorium?
So I think a couple things to note on this plan as well. There would definitely be an interim phasing plan. So we would identify what we're moving forward with as phase 1 of the long-term master plan, and then identify, does that mean we're renovating those or still utilizing those as the football locker rooms for another 5-10 years, whatever that threshold is. So there's another layer of that. Phasing wise, as we look at district priorities and move through that, I will note this is one of the more challenging ones when it comes to phasing and how much of an apple, how big of a bite of an apple are we taking in phase 1? As we look at the location of this building, it sits on the baseball field, the existing baseball field. You can't be down a baseball field. So first thing that has to be done for this plan to work is to move baseball. That wasn't the number 1 priority from the community group, but that is, in order to make any of this work, baseball field has to move. And then at that point, you have the option to prioritize any of the other items following that. So, and in the intermediate time, until that one singular main building gets built, we're still utilizing existing locker rooms that are spread out across the high school, still utilizing existing weight rooms that are spread out elsewhere across the high school. Those items in that phasing. The timeline for building a stadium or a baseball field fits tightly, but can fit in the off season between baseball. So between May and January, it's tight in there, but it's possible.
This could be true, right? Like for this to happen, then if we pass the bond that included some athletic facility upgrades and the adoption of a master plan we're working towards, we'd use that money and the part allocated to athletics in the end. They'd have a brand new baseball field next to the current softball field, no parking, no locker room amenities, no restrooms,
Correct.
no concessions.
Right.
Until.
Yes.
Yeah, so they would just have to be,
Yeah.
because the committee of parents was like, man, y'all gotta do something about these restrooms, the parking, you know.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to add, my daughter's in 7th grade and.
So we would have to sell a vision.
Yeah.
We
So-
would have to sell a vision with some short-term sacrifices to achieve that
Yeah.
vision. Would be, we just have to do a good job of that, because the ultimate vision is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Another thing with that vision is, as we look at those, we can reference back again to the dollar figures. In order to build the new competition gym, we have to move baseball fields, so we need about $5 million for that. And then to build that building is $46 million. So we need a $50 million athletic bond to do those two things. We haven't touched anything on the stadium. We haven't touched anything on softball, which were two higher priorities than those two items. So as Roland noted, if we can pass the $120 million athletic bond, we favored this scheme as well. But just want to note that not only phasing operations, but also budget is the biggest bites of the apple at each time. So we want to be considerate to all of those factors as well. Speaking through phasing, if we jump to option B, softball moves to a parking lot. So no major impact to an alternative facility through there. That could happen theoretically at any time as we work through there. Baseball field stays in the exact same spot, so building the new outdoor athletics team rooms could happen. It impacts some of their batting cages and their bullpen there, but relatively minor impact that we could plan around through there. The new competition gym goes on the site of Gym 2, so during that 18 months to 2 years of construction for that building, you would be down a gym on campus, but we would still maintain the current competition gym in Gym 3 as well. So their phasing gets a little bit easier with this one. And then lastly, depending on construction schedules, phasing is even easier here on option 1 because everything's in place and moving through there. As long as we can construct these facilities during the off season of those respective sports, the phasing gets really simple.
So on this rebuild in place, so obviously I think we're all pretty clear that Gym 2 is demoed and rebuilt. But when you go back to between baseball and softball, we didn't really spend a lot of time talking about that. There is a covered turf practice facility with locker rooms. Well, we want to say what's there, so.
Yeah, locker room, weight room, training, coaches' offices, as well as our fan amenities, our restrooms and concessions that are going to serve softball there. So, yeah, those are on this end of the building. One of the projects that is in here and was identified as a top 5 priority by our community group is a practice facility, a covered practice facility as we look through that. In option 1, it's a 60-yard field, so 50 yards plus an end zone, as well as some of those locker room facilities through there as well. As we look at the other 2 options, we consolidated those building components into 2 separate buildings. But this facility here would be a covered turf practice facility. So in that condition, it would be a full-size field, as we look at budgets and understand what those are, that easily could be built as a half-size field, and working through that, similar to the other option. But there's no building component as part of that. So as we look at that covered practice facility, that is at $5.9 million for the 100-yard field through there as well.
But it's only $2 million difference, right?
Say that again?
$2 million. From B to C, it's only a little over $2 million.
It's the same facility there on the covered practice facility through there. Yes, agree. The total non-cost difference is only $2 million between little under $2
The
million.
office is not as way down here, not even, what is this for? On B?
Say that again. I'm
It's
sorry.
on
The
A.
gymnasium.
It's
The gymnasium. Yep. So where Gym 2 is located, that's the new competition gymnasium on B.
And it would be in the center of all the offices and all the stuff, baseball, softball, tennis court, everything's over there. The
Cool.
competition gym on C,
On C, I'm sorry. Yes.
in the middle.
Yeah. So C is one singular building. All of our weight room facilities. It is the athletic buildings. If you're in athletics, that's the building you go to. Doesn't matter whether you're a swimmer, a football player, a baseball player, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody goes to the same building there. Where in option B, if you are in an outdoor sport, you go to this building. If you're an indoor sport, you go to that building. Pretty straightforward. They're separate out, not quite as shared through there as well.
And the South Camp, what we use for, what you said about the community wants to know what we're gonna do as far as repurposing, that one is now
In this scenario, we'd utilize that space as a weight room, and move the locker rooms to the consolidated building to the north. Yep.
So I have a quick question, and I know we can move on, but of course I like C, and I also like the fact that the parking is larger to accommodate all of these athletics over there. You know, there's still quite a few in B and A really. There, we have quite a few athletic things going on back here in the back, but it looks like the parking is not, and people are gonna wanna go where most of the stuff is. Everybody's gonna pick these parking lots because this is where the majority of the athletics are going on. And I don't like the way we've got so much parking here. I love and see how we have a lot of parking.
Yep.
And to that, everything's back there anyways, and we still have the other big parking on the other side of the playing field. But have we thought about on C, we only have that one little entrance road coming into that parking? You know what I mean?
So for this,
Garage?
right, coming off of right here, right, it definitely changes that entry and it comes off a non-primary
Would the
road.
entry be bigger or,
You've got two drives.
Yeah, there'd be two driveways. There's one here at the north end of that parking lot,
It could be
one through here. So two entrances in through there. Yeah. And as we've looked at that, we would look to, because that we'll have so many individuals coming to that area, our initial thought is develop a similar sort of drop-off connection driveway that you have in front of the Performing Arts and into the main high school there, right through, into that main plaza drop-off area with parking on either side. So it won't be a solid parking lot all the way through there, because we would, understand there's a lot of cars leaving right after a football game and need to handle that traffic load.
I think I did mention this to Mr. Toscano too, that also I think you got to kind of find a median there as far as parking. I think parking is good, but you also have to look at just the amount of time, which may be minimal, as far as when you're going to utilize the entire parking space.
sure.
So you don't want to invest in a parking lot where you've got 80% of the area, which would be probably your 2 or 3 of your higher football games as well. So, I think there's a line there. I think a lot of that parking would be utilized for football and baseball. But I think trying to invest kind of correctly at some point, you just got to make sure. And there's also the actual parking across the street as well, which is the band practice area that we have parking there as well too. So just that weighing that decision in relation. And now parking in itself down the road, that could also become a space for future development as well too, on the south end as well. And then also, Mr. T, also just addressing and looking at opportunities to, again, in the eyes of the community, of still buildings that have life, like you talked about, utilizing these though and having a game plan, like, okay, we're gonna make this a facility, we're gonna move food service over to this facility, I think is a good thing. So I think that part of that strategy of trying to sell the bond is thinking about those opportunities. And it may be the opportunity of the football senior, the varsity becoming the main weight room at the end of the day, or something else utilized. So I think those observations as well will be beneficial.
I'd like to see those observations as we move along. I'd like to see what you all are all talking about in terms of buildings that you're thinking that can be demolished, the buildings that we should say, what y'all are maybe milling around with, just like you just described, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think per conversation, the South Campus is still, remember, you still need that entire campus. You won't have a high school built until 4.5 years. So South Campus cannot go anywhere. And so that may be a long-range opportunity at some point to be able to remove that, but at least right now, South Campus has to remain. But even John, we've had early discussions about the existing construction trades as well. You know, you've got the weight room on the back end, but construction trades could become something else when we move to season. So those opportunities, I think, are still there in relation to projects and long term, 20 years.
Yes, yeah.
I had a question on the three options. The committee, what was the committee's, I know you talked about the auditorium being low on the priority list, but which one was the more popular one, I guess? If you look forward?
So we haven't shown the full plans to the public community. This is the first time outside of our East Central staff, working with the coaches, that they've seen these. But to touch on those priorities, and Mr. McKay helped me on these: softball, tennis, covered practice facility, improvements to the stadium. Is that
Locker rooms, yeah, accessible locker rooms were the other. That was another one of the key ones. One of their locker rooms to be close to where their playing facilities were at.
right? Yeah. So those were the top 5 priorities. They did highlight, you know. I think Mr. McKay asked them to come up with 5. They ended up in their presentation coming up with 15. But definitely had a top 5 with an extra additional recommendation.
One of the things worth adding, tennis didn't come up in their top 5, but what they didn't know was that the services failed.
Correct.
So we used a modern procedure to bridge it for the last 2 or 3 years, but it has failed. It failed 2 or 3 years ago. But what we did do was safe and adequate, but it was only a short-term fix. So kind of like the press box and kind of like Gym 2, they failed. So tennis courts have failed. So I don't know if we have, we will all have to reconcile the fact that there's some preferences and then there's some needs that we can't.
Yes.
We don't even have options.
Yeah.
All right.
Super. I'm going to just make one, I'm going to pile on a little bit on option C. So though you might not need to build all of that parking, you know, initially, that great parking lot that you're talking about, I'll tell you, Alamo Heights built their natatorium in 2020, and there's just not a lot of water in this town, right, for these kids. And so y'all are going to become, when you decide to do this, you're going to become like a go-to facility. And that's something that they wish they had done, is build more parking, because I don't know if y'all have ever experienced a swim meet, but those things, those are intense.
Oh, yeah.
And so having that parking,
I love that.
yeah, so, yeah, I think you'll really see the benefit of that. Okay, so now here is a summary sheet of, and this is, again, LPA with some conversations with Mr. McKay and Mr. Toscano talking about what might Bond 2025 look like, given these numbers that we've pulled together. So the demographics show that you need 2 elementary schools and a high school as your next things, right? But we also know that you need another network operations center and maybe some more transportation facilities And maybe an ag barn is something that you want to be considering as well. And, oh, by the way, we have these really amazing athletic opportunities that we have. But you don't have infinite funds. So we are going to ask that we kind of help shepherd you through a prioritization exercise. I'm not asking that it happens tonight, but just to start thinking about it. So what we did here was Bond 2025. If you were to take elementary school number 10 and 11, one on the north and one on the south, and say that we're going to use 20, well, whatever, in your spreadsheets, you'll see what year we said we were bidding, and that's the escalation factor we put into that number. But if you do the 2 elementary schools, an ag facility, and you decide to do phase 1 instead of a comprehensive high school, and then you take some portion of that. I chose athletics master plan B, not knowing where your hearts were going to lie, but I did just a study. I said, let's look at consolidated indoor and outdoor sports, and let's pick some priority projects. And so, again, this is Sarah Flowers speaking on behalf of your district. And so I said, well, that's roughly $31 million worth of work. And then we've allocated roughly $4 million to a new knock, which could happen at one of our elementary schools. And then you have to furnish those facilities. So your FF&E, I did it based on $20 a square foot, so roughly $10 million for your FF&E needs. And then are there other district needs that you have? Technology, buses, are you wanting to buy more land? Those things that I can't answer, I put an $8 million placeholder. So all of that totals out to $369,393. And then we started pushing projects to the future bonds to understand what we might be going out for in subsequent years. So, one caveat though, the small high school number 2, as well as high school number 2 comprehensive, those were based on a takeoff of 180 square feet per student. So high schools generally range from 135 square feet per student up to 190 square feet per student. We went in at 180. I did some math just so I could share with y'all. If we went in even more conservatively and said it's 150 square foot per student, and what that's going to mean is you're not going to have like a robust theater program at maybe the second high school, those sorts of things. You're going to take some program away because you're going to have kind of maybe more specialized high schools that have those amenities. What it does is it drops. So right now that small high school phase 1 is showing at 206 million. If I dropped it to 150 square feet per student, it's 132 million. So right there is $70 million worth of savings just by programming a little bit tighter. So know that there is flex in those high school numbers. Elementary school numbers, middle school numbers, those are pretty locked in. But we have some opportunities on this high school as we get into a robust programming exercise to scale that down. So know that there is about $70 million on the table even in that bond 2025 number. Okay?
So at 100 and, you said 80?
Right now that represents
Yeah.
180 square feet.
Just for demonstration purposes, if we did the entire comprehensive, not in phases, if we chose that route at 180 feet per child.
At 180, it would be 312 million. If we did
I just
comprehensive.
thought that was important for the.
Yes.
That's why we're even talking about phasing. Because when she shared that, I went, oh, okay, it was a whole bond.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, if we paired back and did 150 square feet per
Okay.
student for a comprehensive
Yeah,
high
yeah.
school, it would be roughly 258 million.
Okay.
So there is, but then again, you're doing that plus one elementary school
Right.
or,
Right.
you know, so
Right.
that phase might still be the direction that you decide you want to go. But just know somewhere between 132 and 206 will get you phase 1, and somewhere between 257 and 312 will get you comprehensive. Okay. So, with that, are we going to turn it over to Victor?
We are.
Victor's going to tell you what you can
Now
afford.
we're shopping.
See, let's look and see what's in the wallet.
You have slides.
Make sure to let's figure it
Have fun.
So, nice leather, heated cool seats. What did you say was big though?
This is what's the span line for you, the third high school?
30.
33. You would have to pass a bond between that to do the second phase.
All right. Mr. Quiroga.
Go ahead. No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I guess I get to be the bad guy now and talk about taxes and how are we going to pay for all this and what we could actually afford is really the goal of our presentation today because there's only a certain amount of capacity that we're allowed to work with under school finance law. So we prepared a report here for you to go over where we're at currently with the November 2022 bond program for $240 million, what we told the voters, where we think we're going to be at in terms of the tax rate. We'll talk about what your legal capacity is currently under school finance laws. We ran a couple of scenarios that we'll walk you through regarding different bond amounts that you could possibly consider as early as November 2024 for an election. We understand also that the district is contemplating a Vader election or M&O election where you're going to possibly ask for more pennies. So we're trying to factor that in. How can we best message it and make it affordable for the community? And then finally, we'll talk about what we have to present on the proposition if we do a multifaceted program like you're talking about right now. And then we'll talk about the calendar that we should be mindful of if you are going to target a November 2024 bond election. So the first page here, what we told the voters in November 2022 in that successful bond election for $240 million was that we could do everything that we presented to them, and the INS tax rate impact or increase on them was going to be 6 cents, and that we would do that over a 3-year period where the pennies weren't going to be increased all at once. It was going to happen over time. So where we're at currently is that right now we don't actually need the 6 cents that the voters allowed us to increase on their behalf to take care of the projects that you presented to them under that bond program. Right now we're looking at a little over 3 cents, and so that's about half. Whenever we're planning these bond programs, we're conservative, but not too conservative. This wasn't by design. We weren't that conservative, and not going into it that we're going to be really conservative as we progress. We're not actually going to need the full 6 cents. We'll need half of it. A couple of things happened. Number one, the property values that the district has to work with increased faster or quicker than what we used in our models. And number two, the interest rates that we achieved on those 2 bond sales of the 3 that we conducted, those interest rates were a little bit lower. So because of that, we don't need the full 6 cents, which is probably a good thing because we're considering additional bond needs here a little sooner than anticipated based off of the demographic report. And so what is bond capacity? Under school finance laws in the state of Texas, we can only do what they allow us to do. And one of the things that they dictate to us is how much debt a school district can incur. And so this is what we call bond capacity. So bond capacity is how much we could afford if we had an interest and sinking fund tax rate of 50 cents per $100 valuation. They're going to look at how much property values we have, how much debt we already have on the books, and then how much we're planning to add. If that all those factors in there is 50 cents or more, then the Attorney General won't let you issue additional debt. So the bond capacity currently where we stand right now for the district is about $444 million. That's how much that we could legally go out and realistically do. That figure is going to change over time based off of one major factor that decides how much you could afford in bonds, and that is your property values as a school district. currently, we're in tax year 2023, and our property values that we use to set the M&O tax rate, your INS tax rate that you worked with to set the budget, was a little over $7 billion. To put in perspective, in tax year 2013, that property value that you used to work with for your budgets, it was about $2.5 billion. So over time, that's going to continue to increase. And here, it's really almost a for sure that your property values are going to increase because we're going to see residential growth coming in, which is driving your needs that you're looking to address now. So again, as those property values grow, then you're going to be able to afford more bonds. As we stand right now, we're looking at $444 million as your legal bond capacity that we could do currently. So one thing that we all approved this past November is a constitutional amendment, and this is to increase our homestead exemptions. Previously, it was $40,000 for schools in the state of Texas are mandated to provide that homestead exemption, so they would shave off $40 million off of your appraised value. Now it's at $100,000. And so we're starting off at an appraised value of $280,000 because that's the average appraised value currently for East Central ISD homeowners. And so this is a benefit that we want to bring about because this is something we obviously want to share and remind to the taxpayers if you do present a bond program to them, because this is additional benefit that we received as homeowners here in the state of Texas. You're going to see that yellow line pretty frequently, as we always do, because that's a very active voter demographic, whether you're East Central or anywhere else in the state. And so we just need to remind them that if they do approve a bond and it requires a tax rate increase, they won't feel the tax rate increase that have that over 65 homestead exemption. So currently, we have an appraised value of $280,000 to get a $100,000 homestead exemption. We're at $180,000 taxable value that we pay taxes on if we don't have the over 65 homestead exemption. So before we get into the numbers, I wanted to just share with you the assumptions that we utilize in these models and these scenarios that we're running for you. The first one is that for the next 2 years, we're projecting in our models that our property values are going to grow at 10% per year for the next 2 years. After that, it's going to be 3% per year for the next 6 years, and then we're going to moderate a little bit and just say it's just going to be 1% per year. It's very hard to say going out that far what the property values are going to be, but hopefully this is, again, us being conservative and planning conservatively. The second thing is we're going to have a 98% tax collection rate, which is what the district has seen in the past. We're using conservative interest rates. Also, just like the current bond program, if the voters give you authority to issue those bonds on their behalf, we're not going to issue all the bonds all at once. Our approach and the way we're able to make it affordable on the taxpayer is that we're going to issue the bond authorization over a 3-year period, just like we're doing right now. We do that for 2 reasons. Whenever you issue bonds, you have to start paying interest on them. And with a large project like the 2022 bond program and then the one you're potentially considering, you're not going to spend all that money all in 1 year. So you don't want to issue all the debt all at once. Number two, and this is what we communicated to the voters back in 2022, is that we know we have residential growth occurring on the district. We felt that it's just more fair that as those residents come in and move into the district, that they also, and I don't like this term, fair share of the debt load that you're incurring, that they're going to participate in it, and not loaded up on the current residential homeowners that you have in the district, just to start spreading it out. So we're looking at the same approach, spreading it out over 3 years if we get the authority. We're also going to utilize 30-year repayment terms and what we call deferred. This is us basically just trying to manage the debt repayments to try to minimize the tax impact that it's going to require to support a bond program. The last thing that's new here that we did not incorporate back in 2022 is that we brought up an idea about potentially strategically using some fund balance that you have, not on your general fund, but in your interest and sinking fund balance. Whenever you have put monies in the INS fund, those are restricted. It can only be used for the repayment of principal and interest on your bonds. But there's also a way that we could strategically use it to try to subsidize the future tax rate on your community to make this bond program a little bit more affordable, in addition to the fact that we're potentially looking at a Vader election as well. So those are the assumptions. The last one is something new. We're looking at using about $5 million of reserve that you have in your INS fund balance. Did Judy get scared there or get upset at me? But we're looking at utilizing some fund balance to try to manage the tax rate as much as possible for your taxpayers. We ran 3 scenarios. The first one at $250 million, at $300 million, and $350 million. And so the INS tax rate impact for the $350 million bond scenario that we're running right now, that'll cost about 17.92 cents or about 18 cents increase to support a $350 million bond program. Again, that's not going to be an increase all at once. It's going to be over time, over 3 years. And our hope and our goal is just like the existing bond program is that maybe it won't be 18 cents. You know, here we've had a history of, you know, the numbers are conservative, like in 2016, 2022, where we didn't actually need the full pennies that the voters authorized us to do. So the numbers that we're sharing with you right now, they are preliminary. We're still expecting to see your preliminary appraised values coming out in a couple of weeks. Also, the values aren't certified until late July. And if you do pursue a November bond election, you would have to call that by August 19th. So by that point, we'd be working with more updated property values. We'll know if we did grow over 10%, and if we did grow more than that, then that might soften the tax impact that we're sharing with you today. So again, all these numbers are preliminary, nothing set yet. There's still some data that we need to attain moving forward in this calendar year. And I apologize, I was concerned that this would happen, but if you have the handout in front of you, for some reason the PowerPoint doesn't translate on some of the computers. So if you go to the handout that you have, and we'll just go over to a page, on my page, and I'm just actually I'm just gonna skip on, if I could just move forward to the $350 million one.
Yep.
That is gonna be,
Nope. More like a dead.
yeah, so page 11, if you have the handout in front of you here, what this shows is we're just trying to put everything in perspective. Fortunately, the school district, like many other school districts, we've gone through a significant amount of compression where the M&O tax rate has had to been reduced under school finance laws. And so this is us trying to put everything in perspective, because these are, you know, large numbers, $350 million. We're also potentially asking for about 5 cents on the M&O tax rate at the same time through a Vader program. And so you can see there in tax year 2017, the district's M&O and INS tax rate was $1.34 per $100 valuation. The year that we're currently in, right now, in tax year 2023, that's the current year, our total tax rate as a school district is 89 cents per $100 valuation. That's 67 cents on your maintenance and operations side, and 21.6 cents, or rounding up 22 cents for your debt service side to repayment of bonds. So right now, we're at 89 cents per $100 valuation. So the ones in the asterisk, if you do approve a $350 million bond program, and also the voters allow you to raise the maintenance and operation tax rate by 5 pennies starting next year through a Vader program, that would take your total tax rate to 94 cents per $100 valuation. You'll have your M&O tax rate at 72 cents, and then your debt service tax rate, we anticipate to stay about the same because we're going to use some of that fund balance to help subsidize it and keep that INS tax rate low on purpose next year. So that'll take your total tax rate to 94 cents per $100 valuation. The future years where you see the yellow bars right there, this is us, that's when the debt service payments are going to start for the new bond program that you're considering. In this case, it would be $350 million. And so the peak year that we're going to need for the tax rate for the new bond program would be in tax year 2027, which is the 27-28 year. Here using our projections, it's looking like to be able to afford the $350 million bond program issued over time, in addition to getting approval to increase your maintenance and operation tax rate by 5 pennies. In 2027 tax year, the total tax rate could potentially be $1.15 per $100 valuation, which is pretty close to what we were just a few years ago in 2020. In the year 2021, you can see here, the total tax rate that we set was $1.14 per $100 valuation. So now, because of compression and the property value is growing, we could afford more bonds. It's looking like we could be at the same level we were back in 2020. But the only difference is now we have access to about $350 million in bonds, and we're potentially going to be able to get 5 pennies on the M&O side to help support the operations there. Again, so this is just us kind of summarizing. We could say, oh, we ran these numbers, $350 million, it's going to be cost 18 cents. But what, when you put it in perspective, what is that really going to look like, and how does it compare to where we recently were in terms of our tax rate? Are there any questions on this draft?
I've got a question, more of a comment. I guess this is kind of and don't take this wrong, but this is the kind of the math that the government uses in saying that we lowered the taxes from 2017 to 2027. $1.34, now we're estimating $1.50.
Yes, but it is all factual because of state compression. Basically, the messaging here is that, yes, the tax rate went down. The school district really didn't have a choice in that. It was just because the state legislators said you got to get your M&O tax rate down. But we still have needs. We still have to operate a school district. This is us just putting everything in perspective to show you that you could afford this, and the total tax rate isn't too much different than what it was just a couple years ago.
Got you. So, but the tax rate, and help my ignorance here, but the tax rate in 2017 was $1.34 per 100.
$100 valuation.
And in 2027, with more bond money, it would only cost us $1.50.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, can we use this part?
Oh, yeah.
That's their main
That's
concern.
what I'm, yeah, that's what I'm going.
When you're trying to pass bonds. Like you said, the 65 and older edition, I said it probably a million times. Yeah.
By the way, got me a little surprised the other day. My market value went up about 29,000. And not a dang thing to my house. It got older. It got a year older, and it went up to 30,000.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to guess, but do you have the over 65 homestead exemption?
Yeah, I do, but that's not the point. We're talking about the valuation.
Yeah.
What about him? What to get him? Him. He's my age. What about this man right here? Or her?
What we did see, because of the $100,000 homestead exemption, a lot more households that were over 65, that brought their tax rate below their frozen rate, meaning more paid zero. So how many more taxpayers paid zero?
2,200.
2,200 taxpayers who used to pay something frozen. Now, because of the $100,000 exemption, pay nothing.
Somebody not know my stuff right. I had to pay.
I thought that's what you were going to say, Victor. My house value, my home property value went up, and I don't pay nothing.
Mine was zero.
Yours was?
Zero.
It happens.
We gotta get that.
Zero.
I like it. Thank you.
Any questions before I move on from this slide? So speaking of homeowners and sticking with that as a segue, so here this is the same chart that we showed the community in the 2022 bond program. This is us just illustrating that, yes, it could cost for $350 million about 18 cents, but it's not going to happen suddenly. It's going to happen over time. So for the new bond program, again, the average appraised value here in the district is $280,000. We deduct the homestead exemption, $100,000. We're paying taxes on $180,000 value. This is a look on a year-by-year basis of what the impact would be. It's not going to be, again, 18 cents all at one time. It's going to spread out over time. So you would have here we're using dollars to keep the INS tax rate the same. Yes.
250.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't move. I moved up here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wasn't caught up in my own. So $350 million bond program. For 2024-25, that's the next fiscal year that we're going to be planning for. The INS tax rate would not increase. We would keep it the same at the current level of 21.6 on purpose. So that would be zero. Then when the taxes come in to support a $350 million bond program, the first year it could potentially be about 9 pennies. Then after that, in 26-27, it'll be 4 pennies. And then 27-28 at the peak would be about 4.5 pennies. Again, these are all preliminary numbers. They're still conservative. Hopefully it won't be this much in terms of the tax rate that you would have to set. So once it's all said and done, it's going to happen over time. When it's all said and done on a monthly basis to support a $350 million bond program, it's about $27 a month. But again, it's going to happen over time. The tax rate increase is going to happen incrementally for the taxpayers. This is the way they were able to afford everything and make it manageable to your taxpayers. But again, this is just something that we prepared in 2022 because we used a similar strategy, and so this is just us tailoring it to the $350 million bond program. Any questions on taxes before I move on to some of the election matters? Okay, so now I get to be about it again. First it was taxes, and now I got to tell you I was looking at option C. It sounds really neat and wonderful, and I love it too. However, what I'm seeing there is at the minimum 3 separate propositions that you would have to do. So in 2022, the district, when you had that bond election for $240 million, you were able to present to your voters just one ballot proposition. Because the projects that you're considering all fit under what the state calls the general purpose category, where you could have, and that typically educational facilities, any transportation, police, administration, things that involve operating a school district and focusing on academics and instruction, that's considered general purpose. So in 2022, we could fit the $240 million into that one general purpose bond, ballot proposition. Now we're actually considering things that aren't necessarily considered general purpose on the state side. And so with that option C, I saw recreational facilities and what they mean by that. And these are the separate categories: softball, baseball fields, returfing even existing fields. Potentially an auditorium is its own ballot proposition. Improvements to the football stadium, even if it's for a replacement of a field, press box. Things like that. They're going to have to require separate propositions. Initially, when this law came out in 2019, there was some confusion. Well, we're doing a bunch of athletic propositions. Can we just have the educational one here and then all athletics bundled into a separate proposition? And the answer is no. You would have to, and it depends on, the lawyers are going to analyze this, but just me putting on my lawyer hat, looking at proposition C or the option C, I'm seeing probably about 3 propositions aside from the general purpose proposition. So your elementary schools, your middle school, your high school, things like that, your ag facility, that is all going to be general proposition. The elementary schools, like they're going to have their own gymnasium, that's going to still be in the general proposition because that's going to be PE related. But for the athletic portion that you're thinking about here, this master plan, that in itself, depending on when you actually ask for those bond dollars, could potentially be multiple propositions in addition to the general proposition that's going to include your elementary schools and also your high school. So just keep note of that. So these are the separate and apart proposition items that are dictated by the projects that you're going to use those bond dollars for. So the first one is stadium. Whether it's repair or building a new one, you have to separate that out. An auditorium, as we discussed, recreational facility, which is softball, baseball fields traditionally, tennis fields, tennis courts are kind of like on the gray area there, so we'll need some consultation from bond attorneys on that one. Performing arts facility have to be separate. Teacher housing, which we're not considering here. And then the technology portion of that, that's really only if you're pursuing these one-on-one initiatives, if you're going to buy laptops or iPads, for students. Those have to be a separate proposition, but if you're going to build a new school and you obviously need wiring, or you're going to renovate an existing facility, you're going to need to upgrade the Wi-Fi technology infrastructure. That doesn't require a separate proposition. What they mean is just anything that I could pick up and take home with me, that would require a separate proposition under the state law. The other two items that are listed here, that was already in effect in 2022 when we did that bond program. But as we go along and looking at what you're going to prioritize and potentially present for a bond program in November 2024, the bond attorneys will look at that and help analyze it and help determine what exactly goes into which buckets.
So we'd have, if we went with C, we'd have 3 different bond proposals to the community.
Probably 4, because you're going to have the elementary school, the high school, all in one potentially. And then you would have, recreational, which is softball, baseball, an auditorium, stadium improvements to your football system. So at minimum, you're looking at 4 if you're considering everything that we talked about tonight. The district still has the option to break it out even further than that, but at the minimum, we're looking at 4 propositions based off of the...
Plus the Vader.
Plus the Vader, yes, sir. So that's 5. Mm-hmm. That's 5.
Now say like Gym 2, it's used for PE as well. Could that, I mean, I know some upon attorney on this,
Yeah.
but what have y'all experienced with that sort of thing?
It's been part of the general proposition. I've also experienced having softball and baseball as part of the general proposition if you don't have the seating of 1,000, but maybe
that's
we were looking at it.
Yeah, well, no, to be honest, it is a risk factor that, I'm not a bond attorney, I'm just the financial advisor, but the bond attorney that the district uses, each bond attorney in the state of Texas is different. The bond attorneys that the district uses are one of the top in the state, and they read this law pretty conservatively. And they've advised other clients I work with them, or with other school districts, that baseball, softball fields are part of the recreation. The stadium, with respect to 1,000 seating capacity, that one, what the majority of folks out there read it as is football. The recreational facility does not have a seating capacity assigned to it, and the bond attorneys, at least that the district work with, they categorize softball, baseball improvements into the recreation.
And the same for that covered practice facility, you think would fall into that as well?
So it's going to depend. It's going to depend on a couple of things. Number one, the educational use of it. If it's like more than 50% is PE, then the attorney will say okay. And really, when I was talking about the risk component of it, each attorney reads it differently, the state law. Some attorneys and some clients will say, okay, thank you for the advice, but I think we're going to listen to our architects and we're going to put it all into one general proposition. and that's fine. As a school district, you decide to do whatever you want to do. The risk is that we have a bond election. We don't separate it out like the law intended or state intended. The risk is that everything passes, we go and present the bond documents to the Texas Attorney General's office, which is the final authority on all bond issuances before we receive the monies. And the AG says, well, we're looking at the website and it looks like you're doing some athletic things, why don't you separate them out? The risk is, and the big scare for us, is that we've done all this work, it passes, we got a good interest rate for you, we're about to close, and the AG says, no, you can't close because you didn't follow this law. They haven't been as strict on this 2019 law, but that is just a consideration that you would take as a school district. Do I want to take that risk and go through all this, have it successful, and then the AG at the last minute says no because you didn't segregate the propositions? Or do you just play it safe and just separate everything out? So again, it's just really going to be a bond attorney decision and the district decision. But I've worked with some of those attorneys that say, okay, baseball, softball field could just be.
Yeah, and then we've heard, well, it only counts when they're co-located.
Yeah.
Like if they were co-located, like we're showing in those options, then together that's all substantially over 1,000,
Yeah.
so everything would have to be in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, conservative is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
And because you got a visitor's press box, you need to put an elevator out there too.
Any questions on the proposition? I'm not going to be the final like dictator on that. It's going to be the bond attorneys.
Just wait
Yeah,
around.
yeah. We'll put that on us.
Play with the lawyer.
I don't know if that's a compliment or anything. So this is just a summary look. If you are going to shoot for a November election, you would have to call that election by August 19th, in addition to calling a vader if you decide to go that route. So before that time, obviously, you would have had more time to consider the projects you're going to prioritize, consult with the bond attorneys to see what propositions we have to use, and after that, you call it August 19th or later.
What is it for May?
For May, it's typically about mid-February.
Any other questions? Well, this time I won't forget. Thank you very much for your service.
Oh, no. I'm the one that have to thank you all. I appreciate the support and everything. And the district has had May and November elections, so that's always out there. It just kind of depends in this day and age. And your voter demographics change quite a bit too, I trust.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will move on to item 6, executive session, 6.1, discussion regarding real property. Mr. McCray, what is the time?
It is 7:31.
7:31. The Board of Trustees on April 16, 2024, beginning at 7:31 p.m., convened in a closed meeting in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act Government Code, Section 551.074. All right. The board ended its closed meeting at 7:51 p.m. on April 16, 2024. No action was taken in the closed meeting. With that, we will move on to item 7, adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?